That's funny. Yeah. How you been?
Been pretty good. I just got done with work. I actually had a little bit of an early day today, which was nice for me. That doesn't always happen for me, but I kind of planned it that way. I've had a lot of mechanical work that I've been doing at my job this week, and so yesterday and today were both kind of shorter days, was nice for me just to kind
Yeah.
of get done and be able to get home.
Well, I noticed you got big mitts. Look at my hand. Look how small
Yeah,
my hand is.
yeah, yeah.
Like, look at those mitts.
Mine are always,
They're like gloves. They're
they're beat up
huge.
too. I mean, they're
You look
just
like
because I'm always doing mechanical work and
you look like
stuff like that.
Popeye.
Yeah, Popeye,
Big
Sailor Man.
forearm. Yeah, exactly. Big
I used
mitts,
to, man,
maybe.
used to have some guns on me. I don't really have them
Oh
now
yeah,
because I'm getting old. But I used to have some guns on me years ago. But
I hear
everything
you.
as you get older, those muscles they just start to deteriorate a little bit. I hate to say it. That's just
I know.
kids. If you don't know, don't get old. That's what happens when you get old. It
Exactly.
stinks.
Don't stop working out. I went to jiu-jitsu last Friday and I had to fight like 6 or 7 guys. Man, I got tossed around like a rag doll. Choked 1 or 2 guys, but the other guys, man, I'm so tired. We're going 7 minutes at a time, and I was just exhausted by the end of it. Like when you're trying to grab a guy by the hair and choke him, he doesn't want to go with that. It's weird. He doesn't want to move. It's like, dude, just hold your head here so I can choke you and you can go to sleep and it'll be so nice. But I'm non-violent, just so you know. I'm
What's
non-violent.
rough is when you start getting older. Like I used to, like Seinfeld, the Festivus feats of strength. We used to have my little brother and I. He's about 4 years younger than me. Every year, like I don't remember if we did it on Thanksgiving or when we picked, but like every year we would just get together and have an arm wrestling match. And
Yes.
I would always dominate. I was always the winner. And my kid brother was just like, oh, I'll get you next year.
Yep.
And then it kind of started with my son, same thing. Once they start getting older and they're building muscles, they want to test the old bull and see if they can take down the old bull. And, for a long time, I was the undisputed champion. But then as you get older, like a couple of years ago, I had the same old arm wrestling match with my brother. And it's just like a stalemate. We're both like,
Yep.
and so
Yep.
you're like, man, I don't know if I want to do this next year. I might not win next year. And you
I
start kind
know.
of calling off the battles like, no, I don't think I want to do
Yeah.
this next year.
No, it's true. Like I'm 55 right now, and when I was 45, I felt like I was kind of peaking in strength because I was able to
Yes.
bench 300 pounds.
Yes. Yep.
And now I'll be lucky if I could bench the weight or like the
Yeah.
bar.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then I go to my son who's 30, and it used to be when he was like 16, 18, 20, you're like, yeah, slam him around, whatever kind of
Yep.
stuff. Now I go to grab and I'm like, oh my Lord, like my hand's going to break and we haven't even done anything yet. He just like,
that's just what happens. I'm the same way because I'm 1 year behind you. I'm 54.
yeah,
And I do a lot of farm work and stuff. And I mean, I used to be able to go out there and I would, have you ever seen the cowboys, like how they bulldog a calf? They'll just grab them under their
yeah,
neck and under their flank. I used to do all the time. I'd throw them down and work on them. I would take like sacks of feed that were 50 pounds. I'm like, give me 2 of them. I'd throw 2 of them up on my shoulder.
yeah,
And now as you get a little older, it's not quite as easy as it used to be. And you feel it, but
yeah.
so what have I missed? You've been talking about Gaza and Trump and what's going on over there. What did I miss before I came on, brother?
The first hour or so we're talking about Trump could be in a little bit of a pickle if he doesn't do what he said he was going to do
Yeah, I
with
agree.
regards to Gaza. There's a little bit of if you say, hey, if you guys don't comply by 12 o'clock noon your time, I'm going to level this place. All hell is going to break loose. So now, if they don't do something, they don't give the hostages back, you're now going to look like a weak leader. And I'm not trying to encourage them to go and bomb the heck out of the place, but now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
I totally agree. He's got to mean what he says. Otherwise, especially with that group of people, they only respect strength. And if you project a little bit of weakness or you project a little bit of, I didn't really mean what I said the first time,
right?
They're just going to take advantage of you. And frankly, they've gotten away with that for so long because, here they'll trade 3 hostages at a time for 100 prisoners that have committed atrocities. It's not a fair trade at all, but they're getting away with it. Yeah. And it's because they've got the leverage because they've got all those tunnels. So really, what are you going to do? Because if you want to bomb them to smithereens, you're going to take out the hostages that they have down in the tunnels. So
Yeah.
this is a real tough game of brinksmanship that Trump is playing. But I agree with you. He's going to have to make good on it. Otherwise, you can't show weakness. If you show a sign of weakness, and it'll go with everybody else he's negotiating with too. Putin.
Yes.
I mean, as soon as he shows that first sign of I didn't really mean what I had to say,
Right.
it all comes unglued. Everything's going to come unraveled. So it's going to be interesting to watch on Saturday. I mean,
Yeah.
there might be a fireworks show that goes on. We don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like we're either going to wake up in the morning and it'll be like, did you know what happened last night? All hell broke loose on Gaza and it was actually leveled. He actually did what he said or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll be back to the negotiating table because Hamas came up with something and said, because some of these people are sick, we can't release them yet, but we're going to give you 3. And we promise within 72 hours,
Right.
you'll get all hostages back. And then after 72 hours, it's like, I know we said 72, but because of some thing, we need another week or whatever.
Yep.
Like it's either we're going to be surprised tomorrow with an onslaught of all of a sudden, it could be a carrier moving in that direction from the US. And then you're like, oh, they're serious now. It's noon. And now Trump said, I told you guys to take me serious. So now we're deploying troops and we're landing them on Gaza soil. And we're taking over this area because you didn't take us seriously. But we have to carpet bomb the area with our new B-21 bombers. And we're going to lay it out. So you have now 24 hours to get everybody out because the bombing starts Monday morning at midnight or whatever. Like, that's what I could see the next thing because you didn't honor this agreement at noon. We're bombing this place. So get out. Get out of Dodge. I don't care if you got to go to Egypt, if you got to go north, if you got to get into Israel, whatever it is, or take boats out to sea. This place is getting carpet bombed by Monday.
Yes. Yep. It's like fumigating your house when you have roaches. It's like, everybody take the pets out, take everybody you care about because, the rest of the house, it's just. But what I think would be interesting, and I don't know, I'm not predicting this. I just think it would be interesting. Plot twist. What if? I mean, we all know they have technologies that they just don't tell us about. And we saw that kind of last year with the Israelis with the whole pager thing that went on. Where they set off a bunch of pagers and everything. So plot twist. What if Saturday at noon? What if they keep on holding on to the hostages, and what if they open up the manhole to one of those tunnels and send a bunch of little drones down in there that are able to detect and kill and whatever. So like in other words, if Hamas wanted to kill the hostages so that the drones couldn't kill them, I guess they could do that, but then that makes them look bad. In other words, it wouldn't be just us going in there and just bombing the heck out of everything. It might be a much more targeted, sophisticated attack, which, like I said, that would be quite a plot twist if we had technology like that. I'm not saying we do because I obviously have no idea, but
and there could be a botch attempt as well. Like
yes,
this happened. I think it was it 1972, the Olympics or whatever, and where Israeli hostages were captured on a plane or whatever, and then they tried to go and surround the plane, and they ended up getting all killed or something. Like it was a horrible. And I don't know who the president was, but I thought he had to resign after that or something happened. I forget what it was. I forget which president, but it was almost like it was a botch. And then the next time he ran for election, it was like, no, you're out because of that. I can't remember. It was Carter, Ford. I don't know.
Vaguely familiar to me. I know Carter did. Carter was, he was kind of I don't know. He was sort of very limp in his approach to any sort of foreign problems. He had the hostages in Iran. I remember when I was a little kid, he had the hostages in Iran, and Reagan came into office, and it was a very similar thing to what we see with Trump now. I
think that's what it was. Yeah, I think it was Carter, and he botched something.
Yeah.
Either a helicopter crashed or something. They didn't have enough people to go. to
Yeah.
rescue them, and
Yep.
then it was just all
It might have
basically
been.
it backfired.
I'm trying to remember because again, you and I were both young at the time, but I want to say that might have been the Entebbe raid. That might have been the Entebbe raid where it didn't go so well, and like you said, we ended up having those hostages that were
Yeah,
stuck over there for so long. And
yeah,
Reagan came in and projected strength, much the same way that
yes,
Trump is doing now. And
yeah,
it was one of the same thing. Like he was inaugurated, and they were released like even before he took
yeah,
office. So
exactly. Yeah, so I think that was the incident. So I'm wondering if, let's say, they try and get the hostages out and they botch something and they end up all getting killed.
mhm,
That gives you an excuse now to carpet bomb the whole area because you lost
yeah,
the hostages anyway. Now you clean up the mess and then you take it on the chin, where somebody might say the next election, we're not voting for you, Trump, because you lost these hostages,
yeah.
whatever extreme they go to, even though he's done.
Right. Yeah, he's a lame duck anyway at this point.
Yeah. So I think he has 2 years minimum right now,
Mhm.
right? Like, and then
Absolutely, yeah.
is it the by-election or whatever? Like, you guys can
Yeah.
actually get him out right after 2 years.
Well, it's not that we could get him out, but what happens is, and this is typical for American politics, which drives me absolutely nuts
Yeah.
because I'm like, people, are you so fickle that you don't remember 2 years ago why you elected who you elected? What they wind up doing is every 2 years, it's the midterm election is what they call it. And generally, Trump will stay in for 4 years. He's there for 4 years no matter what. But
Right.
generally, what they'll do is people get really fickle. And they're like, well, we don't really like what he's doing here. So they vote in the Democrats into the House and into the Senate, so that now basically his power has just been sort of snuffed out because he doesn't have the support of the legislator. There's only so
Right.
much a president can do if he doesn't have the legislature to help him pass his laws. So,
Right.
and it just drives me. I've seen it all my life, and I'm like, I know there's going to be things that Trump is going to do that people won't be happy with, but nobody's ever going to do things 100% to your liking. And it's like,
No.
don't you remember how bad things were?
Yeah.
Why are you putting the same people back into power that, you
Yeah.
didn't want into power? I mean, it just drives me nuts, but so
It's
that's probably what'll happen.
it's in some ways like with our prime minister, even though he's bad, we can't vote him out.
Hmm.
That's the difference. We can't. It doesn't matter. The only thing that we can do is the political party that he represents can replace him because they're not getting the confidence or whatever. Like,
Right.
the people are getting so mad that they're not giving any more money to that political party that they're like, sorry, as our leader, we're going to demand a new leader.
Right.
So that's the way it works here. Otherwise, that guy could stay in for our entire lifetime. And part of me is like, it's good if it works. And I thought it would be interesting to have the US set up where you almost need one guy to come in for like 10 or 12 years to clean things
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Well,
Because 2 years isn't enough.
it's really interesting if you really understand how our founding fathers structured our seats of political power in the system. Okay, so like basically the president gets 2 4-year terms, which originally it was that wasn't even written in our constitution. It was 4-year terms, but there was no limit on how many terms. That actually came after FDR, because FDR got in there for I think 4 terms and was almost like a dictator. So that was
Oh,
kind
I
of like,
didn't know that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
FDR was during World War II. He had at least 3 terms. I'm wanting to say he had a fourth term, and that was actually a reaction. And the reason that they picked 2 terms was because George Washington, the first president, actually stepped down after the second term.
I remember
And
that. Yeah.
and people thought England thought that was amazing because they're like, this man could have been a king if he wanted
Yeah.
to. But he was
Yeah.
such a humble man. I mean,
This
he really
never
was a great
happens.
leader. Never
Yeah.
happened. So
Yeah.
they kind of honored George Washington. They're like, hey, if 2 terms was good enough for him, it should be good enough for anybody. But then when they originally founded our country, so senators get a 6-year term. So it's kind of weird because in other words, they don't. There's some kind of continuity of government in that
Right.
a senator will come in, and then if a president gets voted out, they're still in for a couple years. House of Representatives, those guys only get 2 years. So they're constantly in and out. And the reason they did that, by the way, is because that is the absolute closest to the people. Your representative, you usually have a local office you could go and complain at. So like, and they hold the purse strings to the government. They're the ones that you have to do any kind of financial stuff has to be done through the House. Any spending bills has to be introduced through the House. So these are the guys, if they're wasting your money, you could go to their office and say, hey, pal, you only got a year left. I'm not voting for you. Get out. I'm going to get somebody new. That's why they
Right.
did it. But all these different alternating terms. But what the founding fathers did not foresee, and, it's just they weren't perfect. They were only human too. But they should have placed term limits on everybody. Like, in other words, now this is
Right.
why you have someone who's been a congressman that serves for 2 years at a time, but they've done it for, 30 years of their life, or these senators,
Right.
they didn't foresee that. They thought people would just come and volunteer and, kind of serve your country and then go back home and be a farmer or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever you were, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
human nature,
Yeah, for
human
sure.
nature.
Sorry, I clicked on a button by accident. But I agree. Like, and I think you can go back to the history of Rome. I forget the guy's name, but there was one guy that was brought in to help the Romans out. This was early,
Mm-hmm.
and then went back to farming, and then they brought him back again. I forget what the guy's name is. Somebody here, maybe on the channel, will know. My history of Rome is very weak. I can't just go
Me
on
too.
and on about
Yeah, me
Rome.
too.
But it's interesting that George Washington kind of did that thing where he's like, almost like, for the betterment of the country,
Yeah.
I'm setting a template here so that you guys can have another government, and it's for the people, by the people, whatever, all that stuff that you guys say. And if it works, it is fantastic. Like, it's great. But
Yeah.
if it doesn't,
Well, and that's why, like, I kind of like some of the people that are in the cabinet. Like, for example, he's been very controversial, but Pete Hegseth as the new Secretary of Defense, I love it because he wasn't. It wasn't like he moved up the ranks, like he was a general, and so now he's qualified because he was some kind of 3-star general or 4-star.
right?
He was just, I mean, he was in the military, obviously,
Yeah,
but he wasn't. He didn't move up the ranks, and so he didn't have the potential to be corrupted by
right.
some of the military industrial complex where, these generals are making deals with Lockheed Martin and, all these other, Boeing and all the backroom deals that go on. This is just a regular guy. He's just a regular, soldier who, I don't know what his rank was. He obviously moved
Yeah,
up the ranks, but in other words, it's an average American.
yeah,
And any average American should be able to go in there and do the job because, there's so many of us out there, myself included. Everybody, you can sit around a water cooler or a coffee room and say, hey, if I was there, I'd do this differently. And there's a
right.
lot of us that have common sense. We just never get the opportunity to serve our country that way. So it's
Yeah,
wonderful to see some of these people that are not really what you would consider to be, you know, government people, and they're getting
right,
in there.
right. Yeah, and
I think
I
it's going to
think
shake things up.
I think Hegseth was, you're right, he's not like a 4-star general or whatever, but he was, like, he did have experience, like boots on the
Yes,
ground kind of thing. I think
yes,
he had 2 tours,
yep,
maybe arguably 3. So it's not like he never faced a bullet
exactly,
for the country.
exactly.
So I think that part is cool, but you're right on the side of, it seems like the higher up the rank you go, all of a sudden you're starting to make little deals here and there.
Yep,
Maybe on the behalf of the country, maybe not. Maybe it's on behalf of, hey, I need a pension after I'm done here. I got to
sure,
make some
sure.
connections or whatever. So I do put Pete on a shelf. I
Yeah,
don't, just because I don't know the guy. So I have a
right,
shelf
right.
where I just keep an eye on people, but I don't know them. I
Hmm.
just know that some of the things that he said is, we're going to build our military to a point where if people are thinking about testing us, they're going to blink first.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's kind of the environment that Pete is going to create,
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
say that. And again, from a country perspective, if I was American, I'd be like, hey, go hard, go big, or go home. So he's going to get the military to invest more so that they're right back at the very top, so
Hmm.
that nobody can argue. Because I think right now you can argue, does China have more power, or does Russia, or does the US? And they kind of go back and forth, right? Depending on the day. But I think what Pete wants to bring to the table is, there will be no doubt as to who the big dog is.
Yeah, absolutely,
So that
absolutely.
so how do you get there? Well, It's probably like what Trump just said. You got 24 hours. If you don't back that up, that goes against what Pete was saying.
Yeah.
So now they got to be in alignment with each other. And they do have these 6th generation B-21 bombers that are coming out. They want 100 of them. And
Yeah.
they're priced at, I want to say 400 to 650 million each. That sounds high. Maybe it's 250 per B-21. So they want 100 of them, not 1,000, 100. And if you have 100 6th generation, the best bombers on the planet, you're not going to see it coming. You're not going to be able to detect these things. Doesn't matter what your radar is, what kind of AI infrastructure you have set up. These bombers are undetectable, and you could take off every day with a bomber. You could fill them up, and the next day they're off and running, whereas it used to take weeks to get these things going. Imagine a bomber taking off every single day for 100 days because you got 100 bombers. Nobody's going to touch you.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think with America, I think with the last administration we had, people were wondering, have we gone soft? I mean, with the terrible pullout from Afghanistan, that was a shameful thing that happened under Biden. And ever since that, everything went sideways after that. The whole Russia-Ukraine thing started after that. The whole, October 7th thing started after that, because people are looking at America like, okay, like we were talking about earlier, with the arm wrestling match. It's like, okay, you used to be, the big dog. Now have you gone soft? Are you the old bull that can't lock horns anymore? And that's what they were looking at. But I think with what Trump is doing, and this is why it's going to be interesting to watch and see what happens over in Israel when, and I think it's also interesting, just that he said at noon, it's like the sheriff, calling the bad guy out at, I'll meet you out there on the street at noon, high noon, it's like the showdown. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because right now he certainly has the momentum. He can pretty much say or do whatever he wants, and he's getting it done. And that has to do with, domestically and foreign, but if he fails on this one, if he blinks, that momentum will change. He's not going to keep, and I honestly think the momentum's going to keep going. That's just my gut feeling, is that he's going to get his way tomorrow, and it's going to be again. And, I know I'm like you, I don't want to pin the tail on the donkey, but man, that thing keeps going through my mind. Who is like the beast? Who can make war with the beast? And that's, someday that's going to happen, whether he's the guy or whether it's some guy that, builds off of the back of what he's building. But the American military, man, when it is unleashed, and when they have a determination to fight, I don't like to get into like the whole nationalism and being proud to be an American or anything, but I gotta say, having grown up here all my life, the Americans, when they're at their best, are really a unique people, because they are the most kind and caring and peaceful people. Americans don't want war. We want peace. And if we wanted to be a world, dominator and take over, we could have done it years ago. We don't want that. We generally want peace. I mean, our military does get in there and nation build a little bit more often than they should, but generally the American people just want to, go along and get along. But once the American military is unleashed, I mean, these guys are like a group of Spartans. They are, the best of the best. And yeah, you don't, if America is serious about fighting, take them serious. Don't mess with these guys, because ever since even World War II, they call them the greatest generation. These guys will get in there and fight, because they have a lot of heart, because Americans really do have a lot of heart. And it's not to brag on and say, oh, America's so great. It's just, I don't know what makes us that way. I think it's honestly our diversity, because we are such a melting pot of people that, has come from so many different backgrounds and, has found a blessing over here. It's very sad to see it, kind of like our culture erode what once was, people that recognize God's hand and God's blessing. And now, the blessing is still kind of there, but people don't always recognize where it came from.
Yeah. When I think about my shelf in regards to Trump, I think about when he got shot at in the summertime. I feel like that was a pivotal turning point, and I have a little story to share that maybe will shed a little bit of light. When I first went into jiu-jitsu, I used to think I was something special, had something really special to offer to the world of jiu-jitsu until I bumped into a guy that was like, he could run and do a break fall on the concrete floor. He could run and flip upside down, land on his back and not get hurt. And I'm like, whoa, that's a different level. Because if I did
Yeah.
that, I'd crumble.
Yeah.
So we're fighting, we're sparring, and his style of sparring was a little bit different from anyone else. When we're grappling just to do submission holds, he would grab me by the hair and then start punching me under the arm. And until I turn around, and then he'd try and put me in a choke, and then I would tap. And he's like, that's not really a good enough tap, Shane. And he'd hang on to the hold. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The normal rule is you just tap and then you're out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I want to see. And then he would use his thumb, and he'd be just tap, or like this part, like right here.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be like on the head. And he'd just do that until you're trying to get out of a hold, and you can get little knots on your head. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so painful. And I would start cussing and swearing because I was so raged that this guy had me in a chokehold that I managed to flip out of it. And I got out of it, and I jumped up to my feet, and he's like, there, that's what I want to see. I want to see you be able to lose your mind to get out of something and then calm down. I was like, oh, you son of a gun. I hated that.
Yeah, that's a lesson.
But then later, because he brought me to the brink of almost death, everything else was calm now, because I knew someone else, even if they brought me close to that, it's not as far as what he took me.
Right.
And then I would spar with my son, even if I was out of shape. He'd put me in a chokehold, and he's really trying to crank it on. And he's like, he'd hear me gurgle or whatever and stuff. And he's like, Kate, I'm done, Dad. And I'm like, why? And he's like, you don't give up. I don't want to kill you. I don't want to knock you out. And I'm like, well, that's part of my psyche, is I know you're not going to knock me out because I'm your father.
Right.
But I don't have that same mechanism. I could choke you out right now,
Right.
But it's because you got pushed to that line, and now you know where that line is. And I wouldn't panic if somebody got me in a choke or an arm bar. I'm like, I know where the danger zone is to get out of it.
Yeah.
And then you tap, because I know now if I go here, my arm will break. I've never broke a bone, but you know where the limit is. The guy could just stretch you, and you're like, I'm still good. Choking you, and I still got a little bit of room. I can still breathe. I'm okay. You shoot Trump in the head and he gets back up, I feel like there's a calm disposition about him because he saw death right in front of him.
Yeah.
He stared death in the eye, and now you want to test him? I think he's a different guy than before the shooting.
I think so too. And I don't know that. Again, I've had conjecture about this as far as like his faith, and I know he believes God saved him, but does he know what God it was that saved him? I've kind of like questioned these things. But as far as just his disposition, you don't see him with some of the nasty, mean stuff. Like, people would always say mean tweets. He's gotten much calmer about things. Like the other day, I heard a clip. He was so funny. He's talking to some reporter. And he's like, "Who are you with? Who are you with?" Oh, that figures. Yeah, I didn't even know your paper was still in business, frankly. It's like he's just like dismissive, like, "Oh, you don't even bother me. You're not even relevant." And it's a totally different person. And I know what you're saying. It's funny because like you're talking about the guy that was knocking you in the head and stuff. I had an uncle like that years ago that like, he'd pick us kids up and like, we had a swimming pool and he'd like throw us in the swimming pool so that you'd smack your belly and, get the belly flop, and he'd laugh the whole time, and it's like, he's just trying to toughen us all up. And it is the things that toughen you up and different experiences in life. I mean, I've had several where I've been close to the brink of death several times in my life. And I mean, when I was a kid, honestly, there was a point I didn't think I'd live to see 30, not because I was rough. I didn't get into drugs or drinking or anything like that. I just lived a very, very intense, adrenaline filled life. I loved to do stuff that was just, fast and hard and, especially riding horses. I mean, I can remember, here's my one story. I can remember when I was about I think I was about 14 years old, and I was hanging out at a horse stable where, we stabled a bunch of horses, and there's a bunch of older boys than me. I think they were like 18, 19, 20. And somebody dared me. See that horse over there? I dare you to ride it. Well, I was a heck of a rider. When I was in my younger days, I don't ride anymore because of my back and everything. But, back in my younger days, man, I was a heck of a rider, and so like, I don't care. I'll ride anything you want me to ride, and I got up on this thing in a barn. We were inside the middle of a barn, and this horse had never been ridden. It was only about a year and a half old, which, you don't typically even get on a horse till they're 2, but somebody dared me. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I got on and that horse went crazy. I didn't have a saddle or anything. I just jumped on, grabbed a hank of hair and was hanging on. And this horse is bucking and going crazy. And I'm, yahoo, this is fun. I'm riding around. I don't care. And then all of a sudden the horse got to the end of the hallway in the barn and it stopped short. It just planted its feet and stopped short because it was at the end of the hallway and there was a big pipe gate. And I went right over the dashboard and I just right into that pipe gate face first. I landed on the ground. I don't even remember because I passed out. And all I remember was some boys picking me up and slapping me around saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And my mom found me later that day. And, we were kind of poor. We didn't have money for a doctor at that time. And my mom she's like, she took me home. One of my ears was hanging off my head. She just bandaged me up with an ace bandage. I looked like the mummy. I went around like that for about 3 days, And eventually I healed up. I mean, boys are like made out of rubber bands anyway. So I healed up and I'm like ready to go again, huh? And so you do learn what does, the old saying is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And it even, honestly, this projects even to your faith. If you're listening now, and you think, oh man, I'm going through something rough. Wait till you get to the other side of it and you realize, hey, God was there with me that whole time. I mean, when I first moved here where I live, I've been here like 15 years. So this had to be about 13 years ago. We had intense tornadoes that went through our area. And I mean, they took down trees like 2 foot around. I mean, just laid them over with the root ball sticking up and everything. And they went right through. They took down my neighbor's barn. And this all happened at about 2 a.m, I think. I heard it. And you always hear how a tornado sounds like a freight train.
Right.
I heard it.
Yeah.
And I built my own house. And so
Right.
I'm listening to my house creak and groan. And I'm like, man, I hope I built this thing strong enough. I hope this thing doesn't take the roof off. And then the next morning, when I saw the path of the tornado, by rights, it should have taken my house right off the map. I mean, I was right in the path.
Right.
It just kind of cut right around me. And it's almost liberating to know, God can protect you, and
100%.
when you dodge certain things like this, it strengthens your faith to know, God's really watching me. He's really protecting me. And with every time you get through something, it makes you a little bit stronger, whether it's physically, like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, or just faith-wise.
Yeah. There's something about your character that, and maybe this is an argument for people that have been on tour, back to Pete, that if you get a bullet whiz past you
Mhm.
and you don't lose your cool,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else can shake your faith, your confidence after that when you face
Yeah.
bullets that you
Yeah.
can't see and they're whizzing past you. That happened to Trump.
Yes.
And now he has a calm disposition about him. It's like, what are you going to shoot me again?
Right.
I've been there.
Exactly. Been there,
I've been
done that.
there. And it's not
Yeah.
to say you're invincible, but it kind of feels like that in some
Yeah,
ways because
it does.
you've almost reached a utopia that you actually survived. I don't know anybody that got shot in the head and lived.
Right. It's
Personally,
again,
like famously,
it's kind of like that tornado story. After that happened, I'm like, well, if God wanted to take me and my house out with a tornado, he could have easily done it, but he didn't. And
Yeah.
Trump's got to be thinking the same thing. He's got to be thinking, wow, I really could have bought the farm, but I didn't. If God wanted me
Yeah.
dead, I would have been dead,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. It's
you do,
Providence kind of thing.
yeah, and you do get a clarity of thought. And by the way, there's stories about George Washington. We were talking about him earlier. There's stories about George Washington. I don't know how true it is, but stories are that he fought many battles in the American Revolutionary War where there were bullets whizzing past him, and actually they found bullet holes in his jacket, but
Oh,
he
that's
never got
interesting.
shot. Which
That's
is
interesting.
kind of amazing.
Yeah, Providence, and I know there's probably leaders that think because they've made it alive that means they're supposed to be here, that they have a purpose and whatever, and I don't blame them for thinking that, because I think if you run across a train track and you survive, you're like, oh man, I
Yeah,
have a destiny and all this stuff, right? So I get it. I understand that. But I think that also gives you a little skip in your step when you show up in front of leaders and they see that you're almost assassinated in front of a live audience,
Yes.
and when you shake their hand, they're like, wow, there's something different about this guy. He almost tasted death, really. And
Yep.
and when he says something, it's like, look, almost like don't test us. Don't
Right.
test our resolve. He has a resolute desk. Like, if that isn't in your kitchen every day, that you're
Yep.
using this desk to resolve conflicts and make it so that people don't think twice about you.
Right.
You
Right.
know, you don't want people go second guessing every time you say something. You just
Yeah.
don't. That doesn't help anybody out in marriage, in relationships with your children. You say one thing. I used to be bad for that. Like, I would threaten my kids with spanking
Yep.
when they're young, and I would send them to their room for a timeout so that I can cool off. I had a cooling off period because maybe they would fight or whatever it is, and I'd be like, you know what? Go to the bedroom and I'll deal with you later, right?
Yep.
Usually with a little paddle or something, right?
Yep.
And then I would forget about it. I'd be watching, I don't know, wrestling or something on TV, and all of a sudden my son would come out and he's like, Dad, did you forget to spank us? And I'm like, and I'm trying not to laugh, right? And I'm like, I totally forgot about it. And so I'm like, just go play. Get out of here, you know? But after a while, they're like, well, is dad serious or whatever? Because I
Right.
was not the guy that was always like this.
Right.
My wife would be more, honey, you said you're gonna spank them. You should
Ah,
spank them, right?
there
Or
you go.
we'd be at Blockbuster and one of the kids would be like fighting over a movie. Maybe they want to see Lion King and they're wrestling over it. And I'm like, okay, we're going home. That's it. No movie for this weekend. And they're like, what? You can't be serious. What? And I punished myself by not getting a movie. I'd put the
Right.
Matrix back
Right.
down or whatever. It's like I wanted to see it for a sixth time. But we'd all come home because that was the rule. Nobody gets to watch a movie this weekend if you
Right.
can't behave in public.
Right. You have to have
Punishes all of us.
consistency. You gotta
Yeah.
have consistency. And that was, like it's funny because when my children were young, and that was one of my big rules. My kids, I would tell them like, listen, I'm not encouraging you to disobey at home, but if you
Yeah.
want to run wild at home, I'd rather see you run wild at home than in public. Do not embarrass me in public. There will be
Yeah.
major actions taken if you embarrass me. Because I'm a young father, and I'm like, I remember what it was like to go out to dinner and have other people's kids act stupid and like ruin
Yes.
my night. And I'm like, you're not going to do that and make me
Yeah.
look like the idiot. And so
Yes.
my kids were always really pretty well behaved and they did listen to me, but I had a problem, with my wife because my wife was the softie. I was always the disciplinarian, and my
Right.
wife was always like, "Oh, really? You got to be right." And I had to have a talk with my wife, and I'm like, "You have to back me because if I say I'm going to do something and then you negate it,
Yep.
then they're just going to think, oh, dad's not serious. Mom
Yeah.
will calm him down, whatever." And I was never, yeah, I believe in discipline with my kids. The Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. So you do
Yeah.
sometimes have to give a spanking once in a while.
Yep.
But I had to give very, very few to my children because they knew I was serious. And
Yep.
matter of fact, the running joke was ever since I was younger, I've always had a lazy boy recliner. I love lazy boy recliners, and that man, I tell you, after a hard day, there's nothing like just melting back into a nice lazy boy recliner, and it has a very distinctive sound when you got the footrest up. And you got to reach on the side and grab that lever and click it so that you can put your feet down. There's a very distinctive click, when
Yes.
it goes down. And so I would sit in my lazy boy recliner when my kids were little. And if I could hear them in the house and they're fighting or they're doing whatever, I'd always kind of call it, hey, you guys, knock it off.
Yep.
All right, quiet down for a few minutes. And then all of a sudden it'd start up again. I'd be like, you guys, I told
Yeah.
you, knock it off. And then after that, if they heard the click, I wouldn't even say like 2 warnings and that was it. Third time, they hear the click, they'd go running for their rooms. They're like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
dad's
Yeah.
serious.
He's getting out of that's funny. They
Yeah.
listen for that click,
They
right?
heard the click. It never got real until that click came. Once that
Yeah.
click came, it's like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
stuff just got real.
Yeah. They know how to push us.
Yeah.
I remember doing security for a beer festival. This was when I was probably about 16. and I was probably $1.75, maybe. They gave me a blue jacket, and I thought I was king of the hill, right? And I remember going up to a guy, and he was kicking beer cans into the crowd. And I went up to him, and he was facing away from me, and I tapped him on the shoulder. I was probably 6'2" back then, but just skinny as a rail, right? And he turns around, and he's half cut. And I said, if you don't stop kicking those beer cans into the crowd, somebody's going to get hurt. Now, in my world, if we can pause this for a second, what I was meaning was he's going to hurt the crowd, not I'm going to hurt him.
Right. You
so unpause. I turn around and I walk away from him. Turn my back right on him, right? And I notice all the people beside me looking behind me like something's going on. And I'm like, oh no. I turn around just as I see a fist coming in, hit me in the face. I fall down. He picks me up, throws me onto some picnic tables on one side, grabs me, picks me up, throws me onto some picnic tables on the other side. And then a whole bunch of people jumped on top of us.
Wow.
And somehow a friend of mine, there was another security guard, dragged me from the bottom of the pile. And he says, let's get out of here. Like everybody was fighting with everybody. And somehow I think I just got a scuff. But because I was so small, they ended up fighting amongst each other and whatever it is. And later that morning,
now I know why you learned jiu-jitsu.
Oh man, that was before the jiu-jitsu. I just got my clock clean. But at the end of the night, the guy came walking by me when I was at the door, and he's like, have a good night. He didn't even remember me at all.
That's funny.
Right? But it's those things that you're like, I thought I was a disciplinarian for security, that my job was to take these guys out with extreme prejudice. I didn't know that I had a mouthpiece. And I'm like, if you do that, somebody's going to pay. And then I turned my back on them, right? It's horrible.
That's funny. I just saw in the comments, John Paul said, my dad would say my way or the painful way. Your choice. Gee, thanks,
which
Dad.
one do you want? Yeah.
You know, and it's funny because that kind of reminds me of when my son was the worst out of the two children. My daughter, I can count on my hand, you know, I think I might have had to spank her, you know, half a dozen times in her whole life, you know.
Yes.
My son was the little rebel. He was the one that was horrible. I can remember, just funny story. Don't anybody tell my son he's on here, you know. Wherever you are, don't listen to this, son. You know, he'd be mad if I told this story. But
yeah, don't listen to this story.
When he was younger, you know, I was out of work at the time that, you know, he was needing to be potty trained. And my wife, you know, she was working, and so I had the duty of, you know, having to potty train, be Mr. Mom until, you know, I found a job again. And this kid was so rebellious. One time we were in an apartment, he just pulled it out and peed all over the carpet in the apartment. I mean, like, he was just rebellious. And this was how he's always been since a baby. And this is why it makes me laugh what John Paul said, because I can remember when he was really little, my wife would tell him to go to bed and he would resist. He was a rebel. He did not want to go to bed. And she'd say, I'm going to make Dad put you to bed. And he'd, you know, he'd rebel, but he was little enough. I could manhandle him at the time, you know. And I would always tell him, I'd say, Eli, you want to do this the easy way or the hard way? And, you know, like, and he just, you know, he never chose the easy way, you know. And so what the hard way was, I would grab the kid and I'd tuck him in my arm and I'd get on that recliner and I'd just start rocking back and forth. And I would literally wrestle him to bed. He'd be in my arms and he'd go, "Arr! Arr! And then you know how kids get when they get tired. Like,
that's funny.
And that's how he would go to bed, like at least 5 nights out of the week, because he just wouldn't go to bed, you know. And I'd say, you want to do this the easy way, or we could do it the hard way.
Yeah. And I think that's what Trump was kind of saying. We can do this the easy way, give all the hostages back, or we could do it the hard way, which is easy for us, harder for you guys.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, in my head, I'm like, I don't think Hamas as a group are just lying out in Gaza, just out in the open.
No.
Like, it's been, what has it been, 2 years now?
Going on it, yeah. This October will be 2 full years. Crazy.
2 full years. So it's like, if they didn't get the memo to get out now, I'm actually surprised why anyone would still stay. Usually, you know, if you shoot something, you go to a different point, and then you shoot again from a different angle, and you keep moving at different places. At least that's how it works in video
Right.
games. You move around because you're gonna get hit. So I'm surprised that there's still people in Gaza that are like, we're gonna stay. It's been a year and a half. They're threatening us to level the place, and we're gonna stay because we're whatever. Like it's surprising to me. I'm almost to the point where I'm like, is there still people there in Gaza? Like, is that what they're saying? Like, I don't know. Is
Well,
there
I think there may be,
population?
and I will say this, I do feel very sorry for the women and children in Gaza. Anyway, I can't speak for the males. I think the males are there by design. They're there because they're true believers in the cause or whatever, But the women and children, they use them a lot as human shields, and I have a feeling that Gaza is, it's kind of like I don't know, like we remember, like say communist governments like China, you can't just travel. It's not so easy just to say, hey, I want to get out. You're more or less a prisoner in your own country, your own territory. And I have a feeling a lot of the women and children are just being held in Gaza because they know they're basically human shields, And again, I can't speak to all the males there, but there may be some portion of them that are kind of held back by the leadership too, just because they're poor, and the leaders are like, nope, you got to stay here and die for Allah if that's what he wants, and that's whatever. So I'm sure there's some coercion, but I'm sure there's also some in there. Like I said, they're just true believers, and they're just looking for blood. They don't really care, But it's a very sad thing, very sad to be that deceived for a cause, But I do think that, it's going to be interesting. And I'm wondering too, I saw somebody in the comments say that noon was like 7 p.m. Israel time. Well, I wonder what does Trump mean by noon? Does he mean, does he mean Israel time or our time? What's high noon from the sheriff? Does anybody know?
What state do you live in again?
I'm in Tennessee, so I'm on Central Time. And so Israel is, I think they're like 5 hours ahead of me. So actually noon Israel time would be, let's see if I can figure this out. All right. So like right now it's 9 o'clock PM in Israel, which it's 1 o'clock here. So it's 9 o'clock there. So let's see, 3 more hours. So it'd be like 4 a.m. would be noon their time. My
Yeah,
time,
like it's 7 p.m. right now, I think their time.
Right.
But when you
Right.
think that, have you been all over Tennessee, basically?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've been to one end to the other. Yeah.
So Tennessee is about 300 times bigger than Gaza.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Utah is 600 times bigger than Gaza. So
Yep.
300 square kilometers, I think, Gaza, the strip.
Mm-hmm.
So if Israel's having a tough time in a little pocket of area, and the United States is having a tough time, what are we actually talking about here? Because Russia's bigger.
Yeah.
China's bigger.
Yep.
More resources, more armies, all this stuff. As far
Right.
as I know, there's nobody in Gaza left.
Right. Right.
Unless you're telling me that in the tunnels there's hundreds of thousands of Gazites, Philistines in
Yeah.
these tunnels. Why is it a year and a half? What am I missing
Well,
that
I think
it's so hard?
the only leverage they really have is that they're hiding those hostages down in those tunnels. And so some of those tunnels, from my understanding, some of those tunnels, like you can only fit one person through at a time. They're narrow. So in other words, you can't just send troops down in there to take over, because if you send troops down in there, it'll just be a bloodbath. One Hamas guy could just sit there and boom, fire a bullet, you're dead. Boom, fire a
Right.
bullet, you're dead, and just keep on firing. So it's very difficult to actually take over the tunnels. That's my understanding. And so, because I know early on they talked about, like, they might just flood them with seawater. They could just flood those tunnels out, but then you lose all the hostages because they're
Right.
basically held captive down there. And so that's the hardest part about this whole thing, is they've got a stronghold where they're keeping these hostages, and the hostages are definitely the leverage, because they don't have a military force that could defend them. They don't have anything that would stand up to our people or Israel, frankly, But it's
So,
getting those hostages out alive. That's going to be the tricky part.
so what could Trump do then?
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I'd speculate. I'm like, maybe they've got some sort of technology. We know they have bunker buster bombs and things of that nature. We know there's ground penetrating radar, so maybe they could target and know exactly where the hostages are, and
Yeah.
maybe they could isolate them, blow up one end of the tunnel, blow up the other, and spare the hostages, or send a specialized drone down in there. I'm sure we have different technologies that we have not been revealed. And so that's going to be the curious thing to watch. That's going to be curious to see, kind of like that pager attack caught us all off guard. We didn't even know they had those technologies,
Yeah.
that they'd hidden all those in pagers. So I think there
Have,
must be something that they're not telling us that I think he's got an ace in the hole.
have you ever seen the Gophinator?
The Gophinator. No, I can't say
Yeah.
as I have.
It's basically it's a long pipe with a little bit of propane attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got an igniter on one side. So basically, you press the trigger and it lights.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is you take the Gophinator and you stick it in a hole, and you pull the trigger, and it actually lets butane or whatever propane go inside the hole. And you just wait for like 5-10 seconds, and then you ignite it, and all of a sudden you see all over the tunnels go poof, and the gophers are gone. Like they don't come out of the hole because they're all concussed. And I thought, what if the US has some kind of technology where they just knock everyone out and then they go
Possible.
in,
Yeah,
you
that's a
know,
possibility too.
and then
That's a
go in
strong
there and it's
possibility
like,
too. Sure.
there's a Hamas guy because we could check his ID and his ID says Hamas because
Mm-hmm.
they all carry ID, right? Because that's the only way to identify them. And then you go, oh, hostage. This guy has a hostage ID, so we'll take this guy. Like I don't even know how even then you would figure out who's a
I,
hostage and
I
who
think I
isn't.
think that'd be easy. They'll go in and look for all the really skinny ones and be like, "Oh, this guy's malnourished. He must be a hostage. This guy, he's well fed. He's got to be Hamas." But
Yeah,
that's interesting. I hadn't considered that. And I think that invention came from the documentary with Bill Murray called Caddyshack. Remember
maybe.
that?
Yeah, I remember that was a good show. Um, so yeah, like I think there's probably some technology that they have that maybe could knock people out. Like they talk about these sound waves to get rid of riots.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
basically just
Yes.
hold them up, and they're so it almost makes your ears bleed, and then you
Yeah.
gotta leave. You gotta leave that area. And I thought, well, you gotta figure out a way to somehow concuss the hostages as well in
Yeah.
a way that you can revive them. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, what are you doing? You're gonna level everything on
Right.
top of the ground. Okay, big deal, but we're stuck with the tunnels again. They're gonna
Right.
keep coming out of the tunnels. You gotta send something in, whether I don't know, like if it was me in charge, I'd be like, I'm gonna send an alligator in there or something, or some snakes, and just let them go in, whatever it is. Send them in there. I don't know. That doesn't help the hostages out, but it's just I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in the military, but it
Yeah.
feels like the problem that we're talking about is underground, and Trump is saying we're going to level the place. So I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that's a surface problem, isn't it?
Yeah, he's there's it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. I agree with you, and I think he definitely has a plan. Maybe it's like something like you said. Maybe it would be like I could almost imagine. I mean, they've obviously got to get their air from the surface somewhere, right? So if
Yeah.
if if
Yeah.
we know where their air supply lines are, what would stop us from just pumping a ton of nitrous oxide down in there, like you get at the
Yeah.
dentist? Laughing gas, where everybody's just feeling good, and then
Yeah.
our soldiers go in with oxygen tanks and, like you said, just pick out the people that need to come out, and then go ahead and just boom, blow the rest of the
Yeah.
place up.
Well,
So
there's a chemical, I forget what it's called, but when you're in the oil rigs and all this kind of stuff, they always teach you about how to go into a closed area because
hmm
you don't know what chemicals are in there. And what has happened in the past where somebody will go in and then they pass out, they're dead. And
yeah,
then someone else will go in and go, "Oh, this guy passed out. Weird." And then they pass out. So in order to prevent that, they tell you to watch the signs, all this kind of stuff. If somebody goes in, stay low, whatever, like
Mhm.
all this stuff depending on the chemical.
Mhm.
But sometimes you can't see the chemical, you can't taste it, it's odorless, it's all this kind of stuff,
Yep.
right? So if you know that chemical is out there to take people out unwillingly because it's like an accident, you you almost have to think that the army has these chemicals, probably maybe biowarfare. I don't know what
Sure.
that would be
Sure.
called, what category, but you put that stuff in the tunnel, you're taking everybody out, and then you just say, well, I had to sacrifice the hostages as well because we want to build a Riviera, and people's life expectancy, that timeline where you're worth something
Yeah.
has hit its limit, and now we're past the point where we care about hostages.
Mhm.
Well, let's just start all over again. Our bad, but hopefully that teaches the hostage takers that, hey, we kill everybody. That's a lesson too. There is no negotiation with hostages, but I
Right.
don't want to go down that way, because how does the family say when all the promises were made from the prime minister that
Right.
we will get every hostage back, and we know
Right.
that that's not true so far?
Right. Well,
That's
you
the
know, it's I think that there's a couple different possibilities that you've raised. I think one of them is, again, there could be some collateral damages with the hostages that is not necessarily fatal. You know, I think even if, like I said, even if they went in with those like sound wave technology and everybody came out with a huge headache, I think
yeah,
the hostages would certainly forgive US forces or Israeli forces and understand, hey, this was necessary to get
yes,
me out alive, you know, so I came out with a bad headache, but you know, it was
yeah,
worth it. They got me out alive. So I think that's a possibility.
yeah,
Or the other possibility is, and I don't want to think about this, but I'm just throwing it out there. You know, we know the government lies to us a lot, and so far we've seen, you know, what seems to be an age of transparency with Trump. You know, obviously he's promising, you know, releasing the JFK files and all this other stuff, so it seems to be very transparent. However, let me just put this out there: what if this scenario happens tomorrow? What if they just go in there, you know, they get whatever, you know, their three hostages or whatever Hamas is offering them. And then what if they go in there and just bomb the heck and just raise that place and collapse all those tunnels and then come back with a press conference and say, well, you know, we got the three hostages because that's all they had left alive. Our intelligence, you know, we had a mole, we had a spy that told us that was it. That's all they had left to offer us. And so there was no other living hostages down there. Now,
yeah,
how would we disprove that? Or how
yeah.
would Israel disprove it? You know,
Are
if
they shot the hostages? We
right,
were gonna try
right.
to negotiate, and they had already killed the hostages. So
Right. I mean, if they spun it like that, you know, it would seem to justify such an action. And how would we disprove it? You know, there's no, I mean, it's even kind of like, you know, kind of like the whole thing years ago when they killed bin Laden. You know, some people were really upset that we didn't get to see his body. You know, they dumped him in the sea. And so it's like, well, how do I know you really did it? And you know, you dumped the body
yeah,
in sea. And, you know, of course we've got a seal that says he was the one that did it. So I'm not trying to, you know, start a
right,
conspiracy there, but
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? That it's, you
yeah,
know, there's plausible deniability sometimes. So
yeah. And I think the clock is ticking. The other option, maybe that we never thought about, is they can get all the hostages back before noon.
yeah,
Like tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, it's like, hey, we got them all back, and they cleared the zone. We're still gonna level it, but we got all the
right.
hostages back. I don't know.
All right, here
I
I'll
don't know
give you.
what you would do.
Let me present you with one third opportunity. I'll do my best Trump impersonation for this one.
Okay.
Okay, maybe this is going to be like our. You know, you've heard about our government buyout here. How all the federal workers that you know, like Trump's like, hey, your job might not be safe anyway. I'll give you a chance to take the buyout, resign. I'll pay you for 8 months. Go find another job. You know, or
Yes.
you can stay and have the chance of being on the chopping block. So maybe this will be the opportunity that Trump offers. Maybe he's going to tell all Hamas. He's going to say, you know, you got the opportunity. I'm going to rebuild Gaza no matter what you do. You
Yeah.
can come and you can work on the Riviera of the Mediterranean. I'll make you a worker. We'll
Yeah.
forgive all your past sins. You come be a worker, or I'm going to bomb the snot out of you. You decide.
That was good.
Right?
Man, I actually thought for a second that you're Trump. I was like, wait, what?
Trump with a
How,
beard. Yeah.
how did
Trump with a
Trump
beard.
get on my channel? That's
Trump
so
with a beard.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I've learned how to do the Trump imitation, and I think a lot of it is like almost like oh, something hurts in my belly. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, you got to have that kind of oh, you know,
Yeah. Let me
interdiction.
try. I like you Americans a lot. I like a lot. How's that one?
That sounded more like Nixon to me.
Maybe. Ooh, whatever he does, right?
I'm not a crook.
I'm not a crook.
Yeah, I'm not a crook.
Can you believe that, man?
Yeah,
So funny.
that hurt a
But
lot of
hey,
people back in those days.
any final thoughts or whatever before
Uh,
we wrap things up? You got a Bible study too
I've
tonight,
got a
right?
Bible study coming up tonight. Yeah, so I'll be there tonight. This was sort of a surprise. I didn't know you were going to do this, and this was a pleasant
I
surprise.
didn't know either.
It worked out well. I got off early from work and saw the link, and we were just kind of emailing back and forth. I know it's Valentine's. Enjoy
Yeah.
your dinner with your wife tonight.
Yes.
And like I told you in the email, I get off easy. I've got, my wife is so low maintenance. I don't know if I could be such a good husband if I didn't have such a good wife to be
Yeah.
so low maintenance. But her birthday was a couple days ago last week, and so ever since we
Nice.
started dating, I mean, like we've been dating since like we were 17 years old, seniors in high
Yeah.
school, and I think for like the first year or two, I would get her stuff on Valentine's Day, and then I would be like,
Yeah.
you got to understand, you're wearing me out. I'm like, I just
Yeah.
spent money on a Christmas present. I just treated you to your birthday. Like
I
the bank
know.
account is
Like, why
dry.
don't they get that? Like, I should have said that to my wife. Your birthday was just in September. Like, why do you want to go to Valentine's Day? Like,
Well,
what am I missing here?
that doesn't work as well. September, you got time to recoup. My wife's birthday is just like a week ago, and so like I have no
Yep.
time to recoup. And I'm like, and I would say that I'm like, I got no time to recoup, And then I started getting into where occasionally, romantic that I am, like the day after Valentine's Day, I would go to Walmart and like all the flowers are marked down, and so I'd be like, okay, I got you marked down flowers.
Nice.
And
That probably goes over well, eh?
no,
You
she loves
forgot
it.
to remove the
She's like,
50% sticker.
she's like, hey, you saved a little money. I told you she's so low maintenance. I love her to death,
Nice. That's
So
good.
anyway, happy
No, that's good.
Valentine's Day to everybody out there, and have
Yeah,
a good time
exactly.
with your wife. And
That's
appreciate coming
awesome.
on with you. It's been a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought because there's only 24 hours left for
Yeah,
Gaza, I thought, maybe this is the time to talk about it so we can come back and watch this
yep,
after tomorrow and go, okay, what are these crazy guys saying, right?
yeah. Well,
So
we'll
I like
certainly
to,
be analyzing it on Sunday. I'm sure. That's
yeah,
going to give us plenty to talk about. So
yes, yeah, for sure. So yeah, so we have a show coming up on Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Mountain Standard. So what time is your Bible study tonight?
tonight it's going to be 7:40 at on Central Time. So I don't know what that translates into your time.
7:40. What kind of a crazy
7:40.
time is
I
that?
know,
Why
isn't that
not
weird?
7, not 8?
For anybody that wonders, here's why I do it. Okay, so I start out at 6 o'clock doing the live version on Zoom with my people in my Zoom room, which anybody's
Oh,
welcome to join. You can go and find the Zoom link on my page if you want to come and join in live, and I record it. And so I take whatever the recorded portion is. I started out trying to do it on Zoom and YouTube at the same time. The technology doesn't work. People on Zoom don't know what's going on YouTube. People on YouTube don't know what's going on Zoom. So there's a lot of confusion. So what I do is I just record that first like 45 minutes to an hour of Bible study, and I migrated over to Zoom, or I migrated over to YouTube rather, and then I go on live as well on YouTube. So like the study's on playing, and it gives me a chance just to take a little break, rest my voice, and then I come on live. But the problem is, here's why it's 7:40. What I've noticed was the first couple weeks I did this. So if I start at 6 p.m. sharp, even if I end at like 7 p.m. sharp, I started scheduling at 7:30. I thought I could get away with a half an hour. It's not enough time to process the video. The video renders and renders and renders.
oh, I see.
And I have had I had the first 2 weeks I tried to do this. I mean, I'm like biting my nails. It's like 7:29 and the video's not ready to put on yet.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
extra 10 minutes just gives me a buffer to move it over
yeah,
to YouTube and without biting my
yeah,
nails down to the quick. So
yeah.
that's why
No,
it's
that's
7:40.
That's good because yeah, I used to have those nightmares where I'm trying to upload something, and if I was in Phoenix, it'd be like a video all day long uploading. I'm like, this is nuts. So then I thought, well, I'm just going live because
Yeah,
then I don't have to play with any of that stuff. When I'm done this show, it's there.
yeah,
It's done, right? Done
yeah.
deal. So but yeah, I appreciate you. Go check out Derek's Bible study, and then for anyone else, we'll see you on Sunday at 3:30. Appreciate you
Sounds
guys.
good.
And then, also with this little email that I have here, I always like to send this out to people. Where is it here? Basically, if anybody has any footage or any links or anything, some news item that maybe US is going into Gaza right now as we're doing this live or whatever, or if you think there's something we missed or maybe we made a mistake about or whatever it is, just email me here at blackswandiary2022@gmail.com. Or if there's a topic that you would want myself or Derek to cover as well, let us know that as well. And appreciate you guys. So thanks a lot.
Sounds good.
If you don't mind hanging out in the back, I'll just say
Got
goodbye
it.
to everyone.
You got it.
All right. That was nice of Derek to come on the show tonight. So thank you guys again for watching. Really appreciate you. And I'll see you in another video. Again, go check out Derek's Bible study tonight. See you later.
Black Swan Revelations here on YouTube brought you today's mind-bending journey. Dive into the discussion, your comments, questions, prayer requests, and powerful testimonies of Jesus' love are what fuel this community. Did today's episode hit home? Smash that like button. New here? Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a live stream or a video upload. Thanks for being part of today's adventure. Catch you in the next video, or maybe even in the clouds. Stay curious, stay blessed.